In the past months, I have been working on the final products of this show. I have produced 6 paintings to showcase the concept I will be presenting. This concept is a reflection of myself in finding a sense of self-identity within my culture and how I find myself within it. In a lot of my pieces, I'm placing a figure in a new and uncomfortable position, and I'm also combating the normalization of sexism, over-sexualization, and abuse that occurs in Mexican culture from the outside perspective of an individual who grew up with a very Americanized upbringing. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. They came to the U.S. to find and chase down the American dream, and through hardship and persistence to do better for themselves and for their future children, they found themselves in Omaha, Nebraska, where I was born. My parents decided to move to San Diego, California, and there we stayed until about 2008. During this time, I created some of the best memories as a kid. I spent my time and my days surrounded by people who looked like me and who spoke Spanish and English at the same time like I did. In 2008, my parents made the tough decision to move back to Omaha. The drastic change from being in California to Omaha wasn't just the climate. It was the nature of the city itself, where segregation is hidden by dividing areas in which certain ethnic groups live. The majority of the minorities live in either the south or the north portions of Omaha. The difference also appeared through the people who I came across, in schools and in public places. It was also my parents having to stop teaching me Spanish so I wouldn't have an accent, and it was missing out on holidays and traditions that occur in Mexican culture. These things are significant to my work because it makes you think of what you could have the potential to lose in your own lifetime and have to find again. Growing up in Omaha wasn't the worst thing possible, but I couldn't help but to question the what ifs. A part of me was always left wondering, what would my life be like if we had never moved to Nebraska? Who would my friends be? Who would I be closer to in regards of my family members? All these thoughts and questions clouded my mind throughout the entirety of high school. And the halls that I walked through were filled with students who didn't look like me, and didn't have the same thoughts as I did, and didn't feel out of place like I did. When I first started this journey of figuring out what message I wanted to send, I spent a lot of time looking at expressionist painters. And I also spent a lot of time looking at the symbolism behind candles and experimenting with my materials. Eventually, I found I had a lot of interest in Mexican painters, not only in their style, but the message and narratives that they were telling. I also found I had a lot of inspiration in contemporary artists. These artists made me find a drive within myself to create and expand on ideas, and I felt that keeping up with finding new artists and historical artists kept my ideas fresh, and it helped create challenges for myself in taking my paintings to next levels. The first painting I created that gave me this moment where I just knew what I needed to be doing is this piece here, which is untitled. This painting is about quinceañeras, and the history of quinceañeras I think is rather dark. At the age of 15, traditionally, a girl is ready for marriage and ready to take on all the duties that come with womanhood. This piece was the first self-portrait that I had created in my college career. Since I was in the early stages of developing my painting process, this painting took the longest to be finished. I would say that this is where everything truly began for myself. This is where I realized I needed more depth that I couldn't capture in one layer of paint. I reworked and reshaped many parts of this painting, building on top of each layer and having to wait for everything to dry. The background itself went through 3 changes. At first, it was this beige sandy color with some green in it, and then it went to an orange color as well, and then back to the teal color that it's at its finished state. It wasn't until I had begun exploring more contemporary artists and creating more in general that inspired me to reach the finish point. An artist that really inspired me in this process was Rosie Cortez. She's an oil painter based in California, and I connected with her through her color choices and ideas behind her work. This painting specifically is what really caught my attention and interest. It's titled Dreamers, and a quote that I found from her website states the following: "The mother's sacrifice allows her children to dream in the present moment and in life. The children are instilled with colorful hopes and dreams while she has been drained from it." This painting was very influential with the colors and the context. Artists like Cortez really encouraged me to include more bright colors throughout my paintings. And the initial reaction that I got from my peers and professors when this painting was first shown was very beneficial in the direction I was headed towards. La Chingona was created to show a sense of power. In many Mexican households, the men get served their meal first, then the children, and as everyone is eating and getting up for seconds, the mother is the last to sit down and eat. After serving everyone and meeting their needs, she finally gets to sit and eat. That is not the case for this painting. In this painting, she is the one waiting and sitting at the table. Her fists are balled and an expression of slight anger is smeared across her face. She's wearing the typical attire that would be associated with Chicanas, and she's also wearing gold jewelry as a symbol to prove her status of wealth and power. This painting took a lot of time to generate. I found myself stuck in a standstill with my creativity. I looked towards my references and artists for inspiration, and this is when I came upon Aji Taiwei. The bold color choices and the composition of his work connected with me and with what I had envisioned with my own work. I went through various layers and edits, and it took a lot of time for me to reach points of satisfaction with each part of the painting. I worked on the face first and really focused on the expression and the colors that were going into it. When I was in the process of creating this piece, I had so much support from my professors, and that was very important in the direction I continued in. This piece was so important to me because it showed me and it really taught me how to truly control my materials. Recuerda de Donde Vienes is a double portrait painting where two figures are seen representing two different generations. The one sitting down embodies the modernized Chicana woman, while the figure that's standing behind is dressed in a more traditional way. The traditionalist has a very proud stance. It's bordering on domineering. She's the maternal one, the one scolding you to stick to family traditions. The ring of light surrounding the heads of the figures alludes towards religion. Catholicism is deeply rooted in Mexican culture and has played into some of my childhood experiences. Growing up when I was younger, I didn't have a say on attending church. I just remember the only thing I could focus on while in church was the stained glass windows that had these figures with halos around them. And I wanted to incorporate that in this painting because of the impact that religion had on my childhood, and because religion is very important in Mexico and Mexican American households. When I was making this piece, it was such a large jump from scale that I was working on previously. I had to take into consideration the change and how I was going to make sure my proportions were correct. The size of the painting was very important to me because I felt that was the best way to get my message across. During the process of making this painting, I was looking at a lot of Frida Kahlo's work. I was specifically inspired by this piece here, which is a double portrait titled The Two Fridas. This painting depicts heartbreak and sadness, and it also symbolizes the different identities as well, one being more European and the other more Mexican. I like the idea of creating two versions of the same figure to tell a narrative just as Frida had done. I struggled a lot with this painting because it was the first larger scale I had moved to. I was constantly going back and making adjustments and reworking my color choices, and I bounced back and forth from cool to warm tones. This piece was also the longest piece that I took the longest, this piece was the longest, I took the longest breaks from this piece while I was making it. Todavía Me Quieres is a piece that I created in response to the violence and abuse and the over-sexualization that occurs in Mexico and America against women. Latina women have been stereotyped as being feisty, dramatic, and spicy in mainstream culture, and it's disgusting and wrong. I wanted to make a piece that showcased all of these things, also while showcasing a figure who doesn't seem as desirable as most women are depicted in art. I was making this painting at the same time as a double portrait, and I ran into a lot of the same challenges with proportions. I also challenged myself with the composition of the body itself. I hadn't painted a horizontal painting before, so this was new territory for me. I was constantly asking for advice and guidance from my professors and my peers as well. I didn't specifically have an inspiration for this painting, and for a while I honestly disliked the painting and I wanted to change it and get rid of it. It took a lot of self-discipline to get it to a finished state. I didn't want to give up on the painting because the message I thought was so important, so I kept going. And ultimately, it was as if everything clicked and I was able to make everything work. I was still doing my methods of creating layers of paint, adding depth, and still taking breaks when I needed to. This piece is titled Resentment. I had this vision of creating a painting that was 7 feet tall and had a figure dressed in a matador suit holding up the American flag. In bullfighting, the use of the waving fabric called the muleta is meant to aggravate the bull, not with the color but with the movement. The figure in this painting has a look of anger and challenge on her face, and there's a strong force in the grip that she has on the flag. When I was making this painting, I was inspired by Mexican muralism. In the 1920s, the Mexican government had commissioned artists to make art that would educate people on the country's pre-colonial history and culture. A lot of the murals that they created talked about social and political issues following the Mexican Revolution. I was greatly inspired by David Alfaro Siqueiros. I was amazed by the scale he worked in and the way he depicted his figures. During the process of making this painting, I found lots of obstacles that I really forced myself to overcome. This was another very large scale for me to jump to, especially with the proportions, and not to mention that this painting is 2 feet taller than I am. When I was making this piece, I had to jump from different parts of it to keep myself from burning out. It took a lot of time and layers to get the eyes and the face in the state that they're in. I was actually in the process of working on this during my spring break, which kept me away in Omaha, and then following after my class I was taking was very time consuming. I couldn't find the time to go in and start painting, which surprisingly is exactly what I needed to finish this painting. As soon as I was able to get back into work, I finished it almost immediately. Taking time away helped me understand how to navigate my materials on this painting, and it really helped solidify my abilities and my confidence. The next painting is titled Reflection. This is the final painting that I made for the exhibition. I wanted to create a painting that showcased the emotions behind the idea of having to fit into body standards that Latina women are held up to. I also wanted to incorporate more of the color palette that is seen in Mexico. Every time I travel to Mexico, I almost always come back with a new decor piece that's covered in these bright colors, and that was always my favorite thing to do. It was almost like as if I was comforting myself and trying to connect to Mexico by bringing these items back with me. And I didn't really start to do this until I was in high school, and at the time I was also becoming more familiar and fascinated with my family's connections to Mexico. The making of this painting was very fast-paced, and it came to life very quickly. At this point, I had already created and somewhat perfected my method of painting. I had also grown a lot as an artist and as an individual, and my approach to this concept and the execution was very direct and precise. I was able to use my materials and my skills in a manner that allowed me to avoid overworking and overthinking the painting. These 6 paintings show a range of topics, but all fall under the same category and achieve the concept I'm trying to portray. I keep a consistent style and use symbolism throughout my work, and I'm finding myself in rural Nebraska and discovering a way to connect to my roots. When I look at these paintings, I feel accomplished, I feel excited that I'm creating art on a topic that's so important to me. All my what-ifs are still there, and that's all they may ever be, but I'm capable of turning them into paintings to help get my message across to others who may also be having questions about themselves too. This wonderful experience of growing as an individual and as an artist has helped me gain confidence in my abilities and gain confidence in who I am and where I stand within my culture and identity. I would like to thank my professors and peers and friends for their endless support, and a big thank you to my parents and family for their support as well. I have always been and always will be amazed by what my parents have done for themselves and for their family. I couldn't imagine what it was like to be young and vulnerable in a new environment with little to no knowledge of what to expect. I would also like to thank my grandma for coming all the way from San Diego to be here to celebrate with me. También quiero darle las gracias a mi abuelita por venir desde San Diego para celebrar conmigo.
So hopefully her lecture here has generated some questions and some curiosities from you. So Jennifer, would you entertain some questions for about 5 minutes?
Yes. Yes.
Given the culture shock and the change, regions from like San Diego or California in general to Nebraska, and having that maybe like lack of expression for your culture and whatnot, like how do you exercise that sort of like the desire to stay in touch with your culture, as far as like regionally? I know, like we were talking about how in Omaha there's still a lot of like ethnic diversity and stuff. So like, what kind of things do you do to help try to stay in touch with your culture in Nebraska as compared to Mexico and California?
So recently, I think around the time when I had my quinceañera, I started listening to more Mexican music, like banda music and just more stuff in Spanish in general. And I started talking to my grandma a lot more. She only speaks Spanish, so I call her every once in a while, or maybe like once a week, just catch her up and just practice my Spanish by talking with her. And I also talk in Spanish with the rest of my family that doesn't speak English. And then I also like to embrace the fact that I do have history in Mexico by showing that in like my decor in my home or just in my personality as well.
Thanks.
Yes.
How did you know that painting was like your medium? Or would you like explore other mediums in general?
So all throughout college I have like tried different mediums, and I just never like felt a connection to like ceramics or like printmaking or other stuff like that. I don't know, I just really enjoy painting and like making colors and picking my own color palette and stuff like that. Yes.
What's a topic that you wish you had time to explore more with?
I don't think I have one. I think whatever I want to explore is probably something that would be in a different type of like grouping of paintings. Yes.
Did you have like a whole, like, did you have this all planned out at once, or did you find like ideas as you like went along?
Everything kind of just came like one after the other. I didn't really have like a plan for everything. After I had made that first painting, the quinceañera painting, everything kind of was just like on a roll after that. Yes.
If there was a message that you wanted to send to other people in your situation, as perchance like your siblings who aren't here today, who are younger than you, what would you want them to hold on to?
Embracing your history and finding a way to connect to your roots. Yes.
Do you think, in kind of just today's political and cultural climate, do you think it's become more difficult for you to stay in touch with your roots, or do you think that with the advent of things like the internet and just kind of people becoming more culturally aware, do you think that's helped you kind of encounter that?
I think with like whatever like political stuff, I think it's only made me want to be more proud of my history. And then as far as like the internet, I feel like there is a lot of more stuff that's accessible to me to like connect with other people who might feel or be in the same situation as I am. Yes.
Well, you make it look pretty easy. But what advice do you have for students who are contemplating doing their thesis next year?
I would say if there's something you're passionate about or something that's super important to you, just keep going with it, find a drive to pursue it.
And you'll be honest and say it wasn't easy, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't easy. I spent like, I don't even know how, I don't know. So Cassidy and I were actually roommates our freshman year in Altman Hall, and I think I spent more time in the studio with her this year than I did freshman year in the dorm.
I might even say like the entire time that we've lived together for 3 years, I spent more time with her this year than any other time.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about what we have for you. Thank you very much, Jen.